Hello, you multi-microscopic molecules of malted madness, and thank you to Neil Burton for providing the malt mention, introducing Ralphie Review 961, in which I am reviewing the second category, which is blended whisky, world's best blended whisky, from the 2022 Online Scotch Whisky Awards, and you'll find the homepage of the awards at oswa.co.uk. So welcome to the Bothy. I'm Ralphie, and this is the winner of that category, which I'm going to review for you. You might be interested to know that this is a democratic consensus from nominations given by onliners, active whisky onliners, and then voted on by the wider whisky community in a transparent democratic process. So this makes it very unique as an award, and what I'm doing is I'm going through the award winners, giving my personal take. Now, the other shortlisted whiskies, which are all worth your attention by the way, were Black Bottle, and if you can, make sure you go for the peated traditional version of Black Bottle, which is very affordable, quite accessible Scotch blended whisky, traditional blended whisky, so a combination of pot still and column still whiskies. Compass Box Great King Street, which is good value for money, although from my palate I find it a little bit basic and slightly grainy. Cutty Sark Prohibition, which is a high strength traditional blended Scotch whisky. Excuse me, I just kicked my bucket. This is my whisky carrying bucket because I carry whisky in buckets, bottles of whisky in buckets, and not cardboard boxes, because I've had the bottom fall out of cardboard boxes. It happens. Anyway, I've just been digressing there. Cutty Sark Prohibition is a high strength traditional Scotch blended whisky, quite light in style, so it's got quite punchy but delicate. Thompson Brothers 6 years old blended whisky, which is terrifically good value and great quality for what you actually get. The problem is getting it. It's very small batch stuff. Then finally, White Heather blended whisky, traditional blended whisky from Glenallachie Distillery, which I have to say is a decent drop, and I'm planning to review it later this year. And for a 15-year-old whisky, the price isn't bad, but for some folk, knowing that it's a blended rather than a single malt, a little bit more on the expensive side, but there's my brief introduction to them. Let's focus now on the winner, which is a Japanese whisky. It is a high strength non-age statement, so this is my first non-age statement review of the year, and it comes in 50 centilitre measures, so it looks rather small, the bottle. This is Nika from the barrel, there it is. And they don't give you much information about it. In fact, typical of Japanese whisky producers, they're very cryptic and very keen to withhold disclosure as to what their whiskies are actually made of. And so you'll get some general points of reference like, oh, there's lots and lots, hundreds of whiskies goes into this blend. That is meaningless, because it could be hundreds of barrels, it could be hundreds of world whiskies, not Japanese whiskies, because Japan doesn't have hundreds of different whiskies. But I want to start with the size of the bottle. This is a standard bottle of whiskey, and I'm going to stand them side by side. You can immediately see that this bottle looks like a half measure. It's 50 centilitres. This bottle is 70 centilitres. If you're in the USA, you get 75 centilitres. So when you see the price of this whisky, take the price, divide it by 50, and then multiply it by 70 to get the true cost of what the whisky would be if it came in a standard measurement bottle. Or if you're in the United States, instead of multiplying by 70, multiply by 75. That will give you a far more accurate cost as to this. And for a very standard blended whisky, even though it's not quite cask strength, they imply it's cask strength because it's bottled at 51.4% or 51%, depending which bit of information on the label is actually accurate. It's one of these things you notice. But even so, this is quite expensive. But the reason that it's a firm favourite and it's got lots of fans is, I'll smell it and taste it and tell you why, is because it's a very rounded whisky. It's very, what you would call, accessible. This is the sort of whisky you could go into a room full of people with all sorts of different whisky tastes. Some like sherry, some like bourbon, some like gentle whisky, some like big beefy whiskies. You could pour this for everybody and nobody would be offended. It is a great introduction whisky, an exotic introduction whisky to people who don't drink whisky. They're going to drink this and say, oh, that's really smooth. This is the great strength of this whisky. It is the absolute epitome of smoothness, which, as you can imagine, regular viewers of the Bothy, is a bit of a problem for me. Nose. Initially not a lot going on, considering the high strength of this. There's not a lot of volatility on the nose. It's very restrained. It's quite syrupy. In fact, I'll go further. It's sugary on the nose. It's overtly sweet, as if you'd taken spoonfuls of icing sugar and stirred it into the barrels when you put the whisky in. Have they done that? I don't know. How do you make Japanese whisky? It'd be perfectly legal, because there's no enforceable rules and regulations with Japanese whisky. They'd like to change that. There's a mission of intention, but it's no more than some guidance notes. It's completely unenforceable, which means that Japanese whisky can be whisky from anywhere in the world. In fact, maybe it doesn't even need to be whisky at all. Who actually knows? Who's checking? Moving on, because I don't want to get started in that. Back to the nose. You can smell there's some malts in here. There's something slightly sherried and kind of with a kind of bolder malty flavour, which strongly suggests to me Ben Nevis Scotch whisky, which makes a very frequent appearance in this bottle of Japanese whisky as one of the mixers, the pre-mixes. Presumably because the Japanese whisky's not got enough flavour that they have in their stock. What other reason could there be? And there's something more delicate, something slightly floral, and it reminds me of Yoichi. Many years ago I bought Yoichi Japanese single malt and I was very, very impressed with it. It became my go-to, my standout, the best version of Japanese whisky, because it wasn't Japanese. It was a Japanese whisky from Japan, made in Japan, which was replicating a Western or European style of whisky. So it's not authentically Japanese whisky, because authentic Japanese whisky is called shochu, I think. Pretty sure it is. It's either baijiu or shoshu. I always mix them up. I should have written it down. So I've just had a taste here, And for 51%, it's not blowing my roof off, my mouth. It's incredibly mellow. And that sweetness, this quite strongly sweet with a little bit of sour, a little bit of wood sour running through it. So I'm going to add a drop of water, but I have to add just a drop. Well, I've added about 6 or 7 drops there. Let's remove this bottle out of the way and focus. I don't want to have any viewer confusion. So now I've added just a few drops of water to tease out the flavour beyond that syrupy arrival. Very Moorish, that's the word, Moorish. In other words, you could have a glass of this and then you'd want more and more and more. It's just like Jameson's. In fact, in the style of the whisky, it's a high strength Jameson's from Japan. Now we're getting more activity. We're getting a little bit more flavour range, more sensation range. There's a little bit of soft bitterness in with the sour. That's coming primarily from the malt component. The malts and the grain have been really well put together. I get the impression, because of the overt sweetness, that the grain is Japanese grain produced in Japan and is primarily made from corn. And as you would expect, it is rather different from American corn whisky, which is what 99.9 people's references to what a corn whisky should taste like is what is made in the USA, which is very overtly custard, sweet and cereal notes, cornflakes. But when you go around the world and you taste corn whisky from other countries, like Ireland for example, Scotland doesn't do it, but they should do it. You get something which is much more fruity and more delicate and really interesting. So look out for it in the guise of Kilbeggan, or I believe, but don't quote me on this, Eggins grain whisky, which is made from corn, or primarily from corn. But this is, I can't go any further than pleasant. It's hugely homogenised. There's no threatening flavours in this whatsoever. One final taste before the blend mark, sorry. The sweetness is now diminishing slightly. It's drying off, but only so far. And it's giving you a very competent, well-engineered, blended whisky. Generic Western style whisky. I've got friends, Japanese friends in London, and I sent them some of this whisky through the post. When I last had my last bottle open, I say, "You're Japanese, what do you make of this Japanese whisky?" And their response was really interesting. As Japanese people, they have retained their Japanese palate. So when they go out, they never go to McDonald's, they go to better quality sushi restaurants where they can have a proper chill out and, reconnect with the culture which they adore and which they appreciate. And they said the thing about this is it's all very nice, but it's a bit what they call, the Japanese word is nise, right? And nise means fake, but not hostile fake. It's complementary fake. So this is in fact a Japanese whisky which has been made for the Western palate, or for Japanese who want a Western consumption experience. So it's been very heavily engineered, not just as a whisky, but as a presentation and as a delivery of product, to be a Western style product domestically delivered from Japan. As a result of which, Japanese whiskey drinkers, real whiskey drinkers, actually prefer indigenous liquors, whatever they're drinking. If it's Sotol, they want it from Mexico. If it's Mezcal, they want it from Mexico. If it's bourbon, Japanese drinkers want it from the USA. Because Japanese are big consumers, second only to the Americans in terms of volume and sophistication of consumption. And that's ultimately what this is all about. It is a mock whiskey. And I don't mean that as an insult. I actually mean it in the context of actually understanding what this is. And the biggest compliment is to make it more acceptable to the Japanese who want a Western whiskey, and to Westerners who want a Japanese whiskey that isn't rice liquor. They put Scotch whiskey in it to give it its distinctive development and aftertaste. The finish, by the way, is as smooth as the arrival. And this is what it is. And I don't criticise her for that. But again, what rankles me is the sheer deceitfulness of not disclosing and not being honest. There's no lies being told, but there's a real lack of honesty and transparency about this. And that's what bugs me. That's what really bugs me. But still, a very competent whiskey. If you want to buy an exotic whiskey that's going to make them feel exotically happy, you can't go wrong, but it'll cost you. The cheapest place to buy this is in Japan, but as soon as you go to any other country in the world, you can treble the price. 81 out of 100. It's a blended whiskey. Blended. There you go. Thanks for watching. If you pop back again, malt mates and pals, I will be presenting Ralphie Review 961 Extras, in which I will be talking about additional understanding of whiskey and how essentially we start by being directed by other people's tasting notes. But one of the great skills we need to develop around whiskey is developing our own sensory perception and having confidence in it, so that the tasting notes on any whiskey or any liquor, the most important ones, are the ones that we create for ourselves. I'm Ralphie. Thank you for watching. I do have a Patreon channel if you're interested, for monthly live streams, Q&As and all the rest of it, and additional videos every week. Pop along, can buy me a wee whiskey and subscribe. And thank you for watching my videos. Do you know what? I really do appreciate it. After all these years, because I'm a bit of a YouTube veteran, after all these years, I still don't take it for granted. I really appreciate the tremendous opportunity that the internet has provided, which has it can transform lives. Simple as that.